All right. Welcome back to the world-famous Tipitinas. Thank you for joining us on the All Right broadcast. Thank you so much to Tipitinas for letting us use the space. Thank you to Nugs.net for allowing us to use the equipment. And thank you for watching this on Tipitinas.tv, our media empire. We have a very special guest this evening, someone who I know quite well. He's a musician and a fisherman. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeffrey Rains.
Hello, people.
So, I'm told you're in a band called, and I always forget the name, Galactic, right?
That's correct.
Galactic. Okay, good. Sorry, I have to make that joke with all the guys when they come in here. Pretend like I don't know who you are. Let's start at the beginning. We've already talked to a couple of the other guys in the band, and obviously what most people know is that you grew up in the D.C. area. You and Rob were childhood friends, but you didn't actually... You grew up in D.C., but you weren't born in D.C. Where were you born?
Atlanta, Georgia.
I didn't know that.
So, I was the first member of my family actually born outside of the state of Alabama. And that's only like an hour and a half from the state line of Alabama.
Right
so, but yes, I was born and, raised till I was about in third grade in Atlanta.
Okay. But then you guys moved to D.C., and we've heard a lot of the story, and I know we always joke about, like, oh, well... People want to know, how did you guys get together, blah, blah, blah. But you and Rob became friends in elementary school when you moved to town. And you have another friend that lives in town, too, that you guys were childhood buddies with, Winter.
Yes. So, third grade, I moved in December, right around this time of year, really, to Maryland. My father was a journalist for the New York Times, or was hired by the New York Times from the Atlanta Constitution. And we moved to Washington, and I moved about 2 blocks from Robert and about 2 blocks from Winter. Who was a manager here at Tips for
future guest on the program,
a year
Winter.
Or two. Yeah. So that's kind of how we met and became friends in elementary school.
Okay.
And sort of have been friends ever since.
All right. And according to Robert, also, sorry, I don't mean to keep referencing him every time I'm going to ask you a question or anything like that. But I remember him saying that in 7th grade you got a guitar for Christmas. Is that right?
That is correct. Like, we were both taking piano throughout our elementary school. And I begged my parents desperately to switch to guitar.
Because piano just isn't cool?
Well, yeah, and so at the time,
Not when you're 12 or 13, right? Yeah.
But and I'd done reasonably well at piano, I suppose. But my teacher was not at the time sort of captivating me. He didn't really know about blues, and I was kind of becoming interested in different kinds of music, and it was like 7th or 8th grade, and we were interested in the punk rock scene in Washington.
Yeah, very strong around the D.C. area, right?
Yeah, so, we were able to go see shows at, like, community centers and stuff. So anyway, my teacher was kind of interesting. His name was John Bell, and he was a sitar player. And he,
right.
And so, every recital, every year we'd do a recital, and we would all go play our pieces that we'd prepared. And then he would do this, like, raga sitar piece, and I remember all the kids, all the parents would be sitting there just like, and he'd be on the floor playing this thing and playing incredibly complex music, like really amazing. And there's a woman today named Gabby Lala who lives in Oakland and plays sitar, and there's an institute out there. And I mentioned to her in passing a couple years ago, like, oh, this guy John Bell was my piano teacher, and she said, oh, he's like one of the most advanced teachers at this. And he's still, to this day, he now lives in San Francisco and is this kind of like,
Ravi Shankar
renowned
of
sitar
San
player.
Francisco.
Yeah, which I was just like, kind of blew my mind. So anyway, that was my early, years were on piano. And then I switched to classical guitar, and then, begged my parents for an electric guitar for Christmas one year. And I got a tiny amp called a Tronix, sort of a little amp, and an Arbor guitar, which I still have to this day. And that was the first electric guitar I had, and which I loved dearly and still do.
Well, I know you love dearly, and we were joking about this before. We heard the story about you guys having Robert over for dinner. Again, sorry for referencing him every time I have to ask you a question about your childhood. But I believe his mother asked you guys, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up or go to college? And Robert was like, oh, I want to be a lawyer or a psychologist or whatever it was that he was thinking about studying. And you proudly proclaimed, I want to be a rock star. And you have at least gone ahead and fulfilled that dream, at least. You don't consider yourself a rock star. You are a guitar player.
A low-rent rock star is how I like to describe my my career. But
Your barometer of success is much different than mine, obviously.
Yes, from a very early age, I was interested in playing live music and being on stage, and for whatever reason, I just always had that. Robert and I always we started a band in 7th grade, the Schizmatics.
Man, didn't let me ask it. I wanted to ask you about.
We always had a
sentence.
band. His sister was a great guiding force in sort of steering us into music that we could actually play in our sort of rudimentary, early years, which was a lot of songs like Wipeout by the Ventures and surf rock and stuff like that.
That's cool.
And then, I had an aunt who'd given me would give me all her old vinyl records she didn't want. And she gave me London Calling by The Clash and, a Janis Joplin record.
Your aunt was listening to The Clash? That's pretty.
Well, she would just give me records,
hip,
and
right?
it was, and she gave me a stereo. She was a great sort of, person in music in my early years that really helped and sent me, off in the direction of kind of DC punk rock and bands like the Vapors and there was just it was a very eclectic mix of music that she kind of turned me on to.
You guys obviously, I know I've heard you talk a lot about it before, about listening to a lot of punk rock and going to a lot of shows even when you were underage because you were allowed to go to, rec center or whatever else would put on daytime shows that were all ages. And I believe the story was you and your buddies were headed out to a show at the Barbecued Iguana and it was sold out. And you ended up sliding into another bar down the block called the Vegas Lounge that was having some R&B act on and kind of let you guys slide in there and hang out and have some drinks and kind of flip that switch into, hey, this is some kind of cool music that we haven't even been paying attention to. I
mean, that was certainly Robert, I think, was much more, affected by the Vegas Lounge than I was at the time. But, personally, I sort of got into blues music just because, I would go buy records at this record shop Robert and I went to all the time called the Disc Shop. And, I had gotten a few blues records from my aunt and I went down there to buy blues music. I decided this, was interesting to me.
Dive right in.
And so I bought Howlin' Wolf's 20 Greatest Hits collection. And I bought a Muddy Waters album and I bought Lightnin' Hopkins record. And sort of took those home, and I was like, holy shit, man, what is this, And it really kind of switched up some wires in my brain, and I sort of appreciated, that music became, very interesting to me, but, sort of almost secretly because, with my friends, we were going to punk rock shows and, we were trying to be
blues,
cool and,
Old blues doesn't seem cool when you're punk, right?
That music kind of sort of captured me. My record collection became very bizarre at that point. It was there was a lot of GBH and Exploited, and I was very into English punk rock. And then in the DC stuff, being Minor Threat, and there was just cool Discord records that were just super exciting and interesting.
Yeah.
And they were coming, Robert's sister had this amazing record collection, and so we would just sit up at night and listen to these albums that were DC and English punk stuff. And then the blues kind of sort of crept in, for me anyway.
Well, it's funny. I mean, you guys, at least Galactic, is often just referred to as this is a funk band. And whenever I hear you play guitar, not even just with Galactic, with other projects, sitting in with other people who are good enough for good times, you're definitely a funk guitar player, but it leans more rock and roll than funk. Do you ever think that about when you're playing? Maybe it's just the tone that comes out, it just seems a little crunchier than your standard funk guitar. I don't know. I
mean, things have changed over the, how I hear stuff has changed over the years. I've been very affected by, I would say in the modern era by people like Jack White and the Black Keys, come to mind.
Yeah.
And Dan Auerbach's playing, having this knowledge of the blues and, people like Junior Kimbrough and R.L. Burnside. And then hearing how, some of these players have kind of put the prism and made that modern, is sort of been I've been affected by that, I think.
Yeah.
In my latter, the latter 10 years or so of my guitar playing.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about the first time you came to New Orleans.
So I was 16 and I was living in England at the time.
You were living in England?
Yeah, I lived in London.
I didn't know that, but
And yeah,
Why
for
were
a
you
couple
living
years
in
of
London?
a couple years of my high school, my father got a job in London.
he was a journalist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was working at the Herald Tribune in London, and so we moved there like halfway through my ninth grade, my freshman year of high school, till my junior year. So that summer, I came back, and it was the '88 Democratic or Republican National Convention was here, and the Democratic Convention was in Atlanta, and I flew back to work for a newspaper here in New Orleans for that convention, and then went to the Atlanta convention just by myself.
At 16, getting let loose in New Orleans?
Yeah, it was awesome.
Tell me a little bit what happened when you came all by yourself as a 16-year-old.
So I came down and or I flew over. This was largely to like pad my resume to get into college. That was my father's theory. So I came to New Orleans and got my own hotel room, and I was working for the St. Petersburg Times, and as a page runner, around the convention. And at night there'd be these huge parties, and so I got to be friends with a few of the other kids that were working, and so we came to Tips. And the first time this rockabilly band that used to play in Tips in New Orleans a lot was playing for a convention-sponsored event here. They were called the Backsliders, and it was like a band that I would later see, and they were like a moderately good, like kind of Stray Cats influenced rockabilly band, and they were playing. The club was kind of empty, and they let me in, being 16, because it was a convention.
You have like an ID badge, so just, hey,
Yeah,
let them in.
So we just so I was standing in Tips, like holy shit. There was maybe like 50 people here, and so we like hung out for a while, and that was the first time I came into the club. And then the next night we came back, and the Neville Brothers, I think, were playing, and Ed Bradley, I remember the famous 60 Minutes I think it was 60 Minutes correspondent, was here, and he was narrating. He loved this club, and he, over the years I've seen other footage of him here. And he was kind of, narrating the night, and it was also like a political function, like a private party kind of thing. So I got to come back into the club, and I think I saw the Neville Brothers, or maybe it was Aaron Neville's solo, but it was a Neville event. I think it was the Neville Brothers, but I was 16, and got to come into the club. So we took a cab from here to Benny's Bar, which is over on Valmont.
You got
Camp
ripped
Street.
off because it's 4 blocks away. Why'd take a cab?
So we went there, and all of a sudden, I walked in there, and the bar, it was a free bar, not affiliated with the convention at all. And some blues band was playing, and I just walked up to the bar like, hey, could I have a beer? And a man that I later knew very well, named Lenny, who was Benny's brother, was like, sure, dude, sold me. It was the first beer I ever bought, I think, in the United States. And so those were the first 2 times I came here, and I was 16. And when I went back to, I then moved back to Maryland, outside of Washington, and I was, the first opportunity, I just fell in love with the city at that point. I was like, New Orleans is like where I want to be. Like, I was just in love with the city. And it was just in my, sort of branded into my brain. Like, so when college,
Immediately look for New Orleans schools.
Yes.
Yeah.
So me and my dad came down here looking. My dad was doing a speaking tour, at a number of Southern colleges, which was really like a way for him to like make money and me to look at colleges. So I got to go to Loyola University, and we actually had a meeting with Ellis Marcellus. And he was like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to play jazz or classical?
I want to be a rock star.
Well, no, I remember. And I didn't. And I looked at him and I was like, jazz? he was like, okay, And I could tell as a educator, he knew I had no idea, like what was happening. But I do remember that moment. We were sort of in his small office in the Loyola Communications building. It was kind of funny. But anyway, I was very fortunate to have the sort of opportunities I did, I think, at that time. But.
So that sealed it for coming to New Orleans as far as meeting with Ellis. You were like brought into the music program, or? No,
as soon as I didn't get into the music program.
Okay.
I just got into Loyola.
All right.
And as soon I was like,
So I was in this band called the Spasmatics or Schizomatics.
But I was like, I get to go back to New Orleans. Like, hell, it was like my first,
Well, when you went to
First choice.
England, I didn't know that you lived in England, and then ended up going back home to where you were from, to Maryland. Was it a conscious decision at all between you and Rob? Like, you guys were buddies, and Winter was your buddy also? It was like, hey guys, we should all go to college in New Orleans. Was that part of it? Or was it more
not at all.
coincidence?
Robert and I were very good friends, and we were both very interested in music. And so I remember when I was living in London, like, I was very homesick, and it was very hard to like leave your high school, in ninth grade.
Did you get to play music with anyone while you were in London?
I did. I had a band, actually.
Okay.
But Robert would actually send me, and it was so nice of him, like the new Discord records that would come out,
Ooh.
So I still have these albums, that he actually mailed me when I was living over there.
That's awesome.
And I remember like putting them on my turntable, like, yeah, man,
What band were you in? What's the name of the band in London?
So, I started smoking hash, and we had a band called Medicine Water over there, which was like me and my friend, who was a very talented musician who has died, sadly. But he played upright bass, and he sort of taught me how to play guitar. Really,
wow.
Taught me a lot about just playing music, and so we were kind of like a high school sort of hippie. We were like the hippie kids
British hippies,
in our international British school.
Okay.
We were we weren't in a British school. We were in the American School of London, ASL.
Okay.
It was called. So yes, we did have a band. We performed one time, but generally we'd perform in in basements at our parents' houses, and kind of thing. But yes, Medicine Water. That was the first band I was in, outside of the Schizomatics.
Yeah, Schizomatics. Sorry, Spasmatics. I didn't mean to disrespect the Schizomatics.
Yes.
Schizomaniacs, or whatever you called your fans.
It's still kind of the greatest band name I think I've ever been in.
Is it? I mean,
the Schizomatics?
Yeah, it's pretty good, actually. It's pretty good. I guess it depends if you guys were any good. that would be the big barometer there.
Our most difficult piece was Tequila.
It's not that easy
classic.
of a song necessarily.
No, it was quite.
Did you have a sax player?
No, I played the. So Robert just had to play da 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 da.
Yeah.
I was da 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 da. It was hard, man. And the crowds never responded like I thought they should have.
You need a
because
sax player
I
for
put
that
so much
song.
time and energy into learning this fucking song.
Appreciate me, right?
But I'm sure it was brutal to watch. But da 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 da. I can still play it. Anyway.
All right. So while you're at Loyola, and I remember hearing stories. Both of you guys tell me random stories about like, yeah, man, we were kids. I think Robert was 17 when he moved down here.
Yes.
You were assumingly 18 by then.
Yes.
Riding bicycles around, going to shows, being the two nerdy kids rolling up on bicycles to shows and locking them up outside and going into the music.
Yes, we would always try to lock our bikes up as close to the front door as possible because we believed, New Orleans back then, like.
Keep your eye on your stuff.
And you get mugged. Just you don't. So yeah, we were.
This was a much rougher neighborhood. I think people forget
This
that.
was,
like 20,
definitely.
30 years ago, this was not the same type of neighborhood.
Yes. So we were biking around the city, seeing music all the time. But it did give us a certain amount of freedom. The bicycles.
Yeah.
But it was certainly dangerous. I'm glad to still be here because.
Well, you were at Loyola. He was at Tulane. What was the impetus to actually start the band?
So, we were freshmen, and I remember waiting desperately for my my gear because his parents drove down with him. Mm-hmm. And I had a Marshall half stack, and he had my Les Paul that I cherished and sold, sadly. But and so we got our instruments that year that we'd had in high school. Like there were instruments loud enough to play shows with and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, that freshman year, we were very interested in, like Robert had managed to buy like some collection of P-Funk records. At the Mushroom, he went and bought, he had $100 and he went in and some dude had just dropped off his record collection and Robert bought it. And it kind of was like, we just sat there with the great funk records of all time. Like,
That's awesome.
I mean, some of which we knew, but a lot of we didn't. And so, that sort of started the education. And so
sorry to cut you off, was it a lot of local stuff or was it like a mixed
No,
bag?
this was more P-Funk. This was like P-Funk stuff. which we'd already known about a lot of it, but we didn't have the vinyl, you know. So it was fantastic to get that. And so I do remember that being like, you know, his record collection was just killing. So we were in the Butler dorm at Tulane, you know, just
the smart kids dorm, by the way.
Just blowing it up, man. It was killing. You know, it was fantastic. Getting that record collection was super cool. And so, you know, Robert became a DJ, and he met a guy named David Foster, who's still a dear friend of the band, and works for Jazz Fest now. You know, we knew who the Meters were in high school. And we knew, you're going to New Orleans, you know, oh, George Porter Jr., this bass player, and, you know, we'd heard of the band. But we really didn't have access to hear them. You know, it wasn't like you could get on YouTube and just, you know, you had to get the vinyl.
You would have to hope that your local record store actually carried that tape, vinyl, CD, if the CDs were even available of that yet, you know. And
so through the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which were, you know, a great, you know, because we were into funk music in high school.
But rock and
Chili
roll.
Peppers were like, you know, really, you know, we had all their records. And so we knew their song, you know, Hollywood, was based on this song Africa, and we'd heard the song Africa a couple times, you know. And so we got down here, and the Meters were going to play, you know, in the first month we were in college or something. And it was like Tuesday nights they'd play here, or it was like every third Thursday of the month they would play, right? But this is without Zigaboo. It was with Russell Batiste, who at that point was like 18, yeah. But it was our, you know, it was the original band except Zig, with Russell, who, you know, was just, you know,
monster,
I can't,
dude.
you know,
He's a monster. Like, dude, Russell Batiste is one of the great drummers for sure.
So we come out to this Meter show, and you know, I was standing right there, and you know, they come out and start playing, and it was just like, holy shit. You know, it was a moment in time I'll never forget. You know, this first show that I saw that band play, and it was like, you know, Leo is right here just screaming, man. You know, like, I mean, it was just, and you know, I remember, like, we were both very affected by this show, I think. And, you know, I was like, this is what, you know, this is the dream here. This is what I want to do. Like, I just, you know, I never, from that moment on, it was like, I want to do that. Like, I didn't care about college. Like, it, let's get a band. Let's go. You know, that was just it for me.
Well, fast forwarding a couple of years, I remember hearing this story as well about after Galactic had already formed and you guys had already been Galactic Prophylactic and dropped the Prophylactic and started recording an album, you weren't able to hit the road yet because one of you was still in college.
Yes, I did not excel in...
I'm not trying to poke fun at you or anything. It's you know, 25, 26, whatever years later, like it's funny to look back at, I'm sure. And I'm sure ever since you guys started touring, no one has asked to see your degree or evidence that you actually graduated college.
But yeah, so, you know, it was kind of interesting. Like, our first band in our sophomore year, when we started, our first shows were playing private parties. And there was a hippie fraternity called the Betas, I think, at Tulane then. And they had this like hippie band. But so they were like, you know, the hippie, so we would get shows opening up for them at times. But, you know, our first shows were like literally doing Meters covers, like in the most, you know, tragic ways, I suppose.
But they're drunk college kids. They're probably not going to know the difference.
Yeah, so,
right?
you know, we were living over by Broadway and, you know, on Pine Street and, you know, around Willow and Pine or something. And so we started playing shows, you know, and we were really terrible, but we had, you know, we rented an apartment where we had a band room, and we just sort of kept at it, you know, from that point on. Like, that's when we actually had a band and started playing shows. Yeah. And then we played a bunch of private parties, you know, opening up for, you know, various Tulane bands or just play for free.
It was a lot of college parties mostly. Like, you guys were only occasionally getting on at a real stage, right?
Yeah, and so, you know, by the next year, you know, we got a better drummer, you know, like things started like happening a little, you know, we changed singers, you know, but Robert and I were just trying to, you know, bring it along. But it was always like, we're going to do it, you know. Yeah. And so by the third year, by our junior year, things, you know, we started to like make a couple little waves, you know, and, you know, the band kind of started to
You
come
built
together a little
a
bit.
little following, right? Like you had people that were coming to see you guys specifically after a little while, right?
Yes. So anyway,
What were you studying when you were in school?
English, creative writing.
Okay. So you weren't part of the music program then?
No, I kind of failed out of the music school. Like I was taking music classes, but I mean, kids were like sleeping in the hallway, and I was going out every night to places like Tips and to go see band. You know, I mean, I saw so many shows here. You know, in that time, and I was reflecting on my drive over. You know, I became so sort of obsessive about coming to shows. Like if a band, like I remember Albert Collins or, you know, some guitar player that I was, you know, knew was going to be this show. I would show up here when doors opened, and I would stand at the rail. I would order cheese fries, stand at the rail, have dinner, you know, sit here and drink beer and like just wait hours, you know, because I wanted to be on that rail, you know, because I hated, you know, not being in front.
Okay.
So I would stand up here, you know, and go through the opening band, you know, and see the headliner, whoever it was. I mean, you know, the meter shows, I was always like standing right there because Leo was here, and you know, so yes, that was my obsession. You know, I remember I would go to the payphone and call Robert. I'd be like, dude, you got to come down here. Like, tonight's going to be good. Like, I saw the Ohio Players a number of times here, which was a great Seminole funk band that I loved.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I think it's something people forget, you know, because now that you're one of our proprietors here at the club, you've gotten to see a handful of these old calendars and random memorabilia is starting to come to light, and every once in a while, you know, you see a calendar of a random June or whatever in 1980 something, and you're like, holy hell, I can't believe all of these legends are on this act. And you know, the club was 7 nights a week back then, and it was just like crushers all the time. And at the time, maybe they weren't viewed as legends or something like that, but just to see the amount of talent that would be on this stage. And then it's not even just Tipitina's, like look at one of those old Jimmy's calendars or something else. Like, there was so much awesome local music happening that it's almost insanity for a music fan not to try and go see something every night of the week. And that's still true to this day in some respect, but I feel like, I don't know, what do you think it is? Is there something about the music business back then versus now, or what is it that it seems like there's not that there's not talented people on every night of the week, because I don't want to sound like a jerk or anything like that, but it's strange. Maybe just people that are all these New Orleans legends didn't realize how much work they can get in other cities, so they were just staying home all the time.
You know, I think, like, where New Orleans is, in a touring band, you know, if you're a touring band, like, you're going to play here, sort of coming from Atlanta to Houston, like, going through bigger markets, you know?
Yeah.
So Tips would get a lot of shows in the middle of the week, which is probably why my college...
Why your grades suffered?
GPA kind of sucked, but, you know, because you'd be like, a Tuesday night, okay.
The Ohio Players are here. Like, why would I not pay $9 to go see the Ohio Players?
It was magic. I'd be at my, you know, desk. And, okay. But I do think that, you know, in that era, there was just a lot more eclectic bands touring the United States in some ways. Like, you know, Tips would have like an African band, and then, you know,
random world music sometimes.
You know, Sonny Schneido, the booking agent then too, was, you know, I think a very intelligent and astute sort of student of music, and
he was. I mean,
he was certainly, you know, in that equation of why Tips was getting great shows.
Absolutely, and I definitely would like to pat Sonny on the back, if you don't mind. We'll keep
Not
it
at
about
all.
you. But Sonny, like, he's one of the people that will probably not get all the credit that he deserves for helping form the live music industry of this town, because
I agree.
He was willing to take risks on the random world music and African band that's coming to town, or even, you know, someone like Stevie Ray Vaughan in the early 80s, late 70s or something like that. Like, no one was booking him. He was playing here back when this was a one-story room and could only fit a couple hundred people.
Is that right? I didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, he was getting these shows. He was the first person, I think, to book a reggae band in a club of this size. Like, there would be, not that reggae music never played in New Orleans, but it wasn't given a real good stage all the time. And he's the one who helped take those risks and started opening up this city for a lot of booking agents that probably would have overlooked New Orleans, thinking, oh, you know what, we tried playing New Orleans, but that one bar, it was a bust. It's like, oh, there's this new place called Tipitina's, let's give it a shot. And it would create a draw.
I tend to agree. I think the club in that era, or Tipitina's in that era, there wasn't a lot of competition as well in town, and so if you were a touring band, this is where you wanted to play. And the modern era doesn't really, it's not really like that anymore.
Well, the modern music industry is so much different
Yes.
than it was 35, 40 years ago. So.
Yeah, but anyway, I think he does deserve accolades as well in terms of like just how cool and his, I guess, understanding it, even in that era before the internet, and like the guy knew a lot about music.
He
I
did.
suppose.
He was a young guy. He was like 17 when this joint opened up,
Yeah,
and he was working here on day one. Nick, go ahead and insert a picture of Sonny somewhere in the blackness of the screen for people to get a good look at Sonny.
Anyway,
yeah, let's talk about, since we got to it already. The early days of Galactic, recording the first album. I think it's funny that Ben was not even a part of that first album, and I think a lot of people forget that he's kind of the new guy amongst the five of you guys.
We knew Ben.
Yeah.
I recognized him.
Well, you were ordering French fries from him.
I knew him from here, and he would come see our shows, and I knew him and then Klezmer All-Star started to play. So I kind of knew Ben, but he was like too cool. He was in Lump, this other band, which was kind of like a avant-garde, kind of like punk band, kind of like Fire Hose, I would say, or Husker Du, kind of like, but they were really badass bands. And so I knew who Ben was, but he was just kind of like, I didn't really know him. Like he wouldn't like come talk to like, we were,
You weren't cool enough, right?
We were the dorky college band, like, so, but anyway, so, I knew who the Ben was. And I would see him at our show sometimes, like pop in the door kind of stuff.
Tell me about the first time you guys played at Tipitina's. This is as the Galactic Prophylactic.
I'm sure that Robert probably
did, but
I don't know if Stanton was on the gig or not.
Oh, Stanton wasn't part of the band yet?
I'm not sure. He might have been.
I think he was. Someone who's probably actually
he might have been.
One of our 17 fans might actually know.
He was here.
Yeah.
Because I do remember. So we were opening up for Cowboy Mouth. Okay, so we were the first band, so we set up our Cowboy Mouth. Fred had set his shit up right here.
Yeah, he's the lead singer and drummer.
And so I remember I was standing right out there, and I watched this bizarre meeting of Fred and Stanton. Because Stanton's like, he's like, technique is so important to him.
Yeah, he is very much a student of percussion.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Fred is like, I've built this shit. He's more of a natural player. Like, his drums are not in a conventional drummer sort of setup. He does it kind of like more, like the Fred that you know.
Yeah.
And so, I think Stanton sat down in the kit and was like, oh, this is really weird, And they had this very awkward conversation, which I kind of watched, and I was like, because, Cowboy Mouth was pretty big, like.
Yeah.
And
Jenny Says was in its heyday for sure. Yeah.
So it was a Tulane homecoming event. It was a private party, and no one was here. My mother was here. No one else was here.
Pause real quick. Nick, insert the photo. I think we have a photo of this. Sorry. Go ahead.
So
we have the photo. It's going to be right here. Tanner, 2-shot. Put it right here.
It's because my mom probably took that picture.
Yeah.
And so and I'm like backstage with like whatever. I'm like, this is, because my dream had been to play Tipitina's at this point. All of our dreams, in the band was like to play this club.
One day this is going to be the mountaintop type of thing.
So the Tulane football game happens. They put the kids from the Superdome in buses, and like I went down the street to Casamentos or something with my mom, and I come back and the place is packed, and I was like, holy shit, it was like, it was like a dream come true. It occurred, and so we get up and play our set, whatever it was, played our set, and the kids were like humping and freaking out. It was literally like living. At that point in my life, like I hadn't really dreamed beyond just playing in front of a crowd at Tips, like a packed audience here.
Yeah, no, that's what I said. Mountaintop. You guys
That was pretty much
we made
it.
We're done.
It was just, I'll never, and my mom was here. She was like, that was amazing, you know, and I was like, you know, it was just an amazing evening. I'll never forget it. You know, the fucking bus show, you know.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to be playing in front of crickets.
Yeah, it's gonna be like it'll be no one, and then but at the end of your set, there will be hundreds of people in here. But
It was spectacular.
that's
I loved
great.
it. That was the first time I think I played on stage here. Was that homecoming event?
When Houseman joined the band, you guys had met him at Benny's, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
Because that was one of your regular hangouts to go catch music, and he would
all the
play
time.
there often and hang out there. He lived in the neighborhood, I believe.
He would play every Sunday night with
Every
Mike Ward,
Sunday?
the Reward.
Okay.
And we would be there every Sunday night. We lived at Valmont and Camp, so we were like right down the street. So we would be there all the time, you know, because it was 7 nights a week live music for free. And so we were just like, okay, we go to Le Bon Ton and go there every night.
How did you guys trick him into joining the band?
Well, Theryl, he...
Sorry, I used the word trick him into it, but like seemingly, this is a guy who's a seasoned musician, 20 years older than you guys.
I mean, Robert and him, we would just go smoke joints in the back, and we were always looking for weed because it was hard to find weed, and he would be like, "Come on, motherfucker," and he would light up a little pin joint and hang out with us, and he was so nice, to do that, and we were just like, oh, and he would start just telling us things about the music business because we were just so wanting to do something, and be in a band and play a gig at Benny's. Our dream was to get a gig at Benny's, which had no cover charge.
Yeah.
That was
what's in it for you? You don't even know.
Yeah. Today there was a band. For some reason today this came up. There was a band called JD and the Jammers, and JD Hill, who's on a poster right over
Yeah, I was
there.
going to say I know that name. Yeah.
So JD he was a blues player and a harmonica player and really talented, still playing around, I think. And he had been playing and kind of, I don't know, fallen on hard times, and kind of his reputation was, I guess, not perfect in New Orleans in the music industry. So he went back to Buffalo where he was from. And he came back, and JD was kind of like a legend around Benny's for being the greatest, blues harmonica player, singer. And he was just the bad motherfucker. So he shows up and he starts playing gigs again with this guitar player named Dave Renson. Great guy. So we all kind of got to be friends. And so JD, Robert and I were down here for a summer of our junior year or something. And JD kind of moved in to our house, And we were like, okay. He was like, hey, can I come stay? And we were like, okay, So he comes and sort of lived with us this summer. And he had this little silver TV. It was back in the day, it was a little screen.
But it was
and
long.
It'd be a big.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah. So he would just sit all day in our living room and kind of lay around watching this TV, and then he would go play his gig at wherever it was that night. And so we just got to be tight with him and sort of learned about what it was like to be a musician working in it was it was kind of interesting to us. We were just kind of okay. We'd go to Winn-Dixie and he would buy chicken and some rice and make, cook this food and shit. And we were just, because he said he had some culinary education, he'd been to cooking school. And so, we lived this whole summer. We didn't really know what to do. We were just JD's just living here. And I didn't, neither of us were going to be you got to go, man. But we were okay, JD's just here, so that's just
It's
what's
the guy
up.
on the couch.
So finally, the college, started. We were JD, you got to go. Our roommate's coming back, so your room is gone. But anyway, I do remember that very well. I was thinking about that today. But that was a divergent topic.
No, that's okay. Well, so for Houseman, at the very least, at least he was finding you guys some weed to smoke outside of Benny's. How did you get him to start? Did he just decide to jump on stage with you guys one time?
No. So he came up we were living at Valence and Camp at this house.
Was it Valence and Magazine?
Or Magazine.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off because
Valmont and Magazine is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, Valmont, not Valence. Yeah.
And so we were living over there at this house called the Armpit, and it was just this, but it was a 3-bedroom, or 2-bedroom, whatever. And so we had a practice room, and we were playing music, and we were trying to find singers all the time, because it was just hard. We wanted to be like the Meters rhythm section, a la Alan Toussaint kind of thing. And so, and Theryl was like this badass singer.
Yeah.
So for him to come work with us was like, whoa, dude, like it was a big deal.
Well, it was in the neighborhood at the very least. It wasn't like a terrible inconvenience if he had an afternoon and evening off. Why not come over and at least see what these kids got?
Yeah,
they seem nice. I get high with them at Benny's, whatever.
I think Theryl liked that we were just kind of like would hang on every thing he had to say. We were just like, oh, really? This is what it's like. And he was, I think he was just a great talker, and he loved to hold court. And we would just sit there just completely, and he was just such a dear and sweet man. And so that's kind of how that happened, And so we wrote 2 songs, which I'm sure the other bandmates have talked about, Ready, Willing, and Able, and Something's Wrong with This Picture. And those 2 songs kind of like emerged. And, at that point we had Stan and Rich in the band. So the band had gotten like much better than, it had been in previous incarnations. And so, and Theryl just kind of like, he took us from like being like a sort of very, I don't know, juvenile high school, funk outfit to like
helped refine you a bit
to something that was like unique and interesting and cool. Like at that time, there wasn't a lot of stuff coming out of New Orleans that was going on tour, and it was just an interesting. There's something about it, So you can put 5 musicians together on stage, and it can be, very boring and uninteresting. But sometimes you put like the right kind of like stuff happens, and there's something cool, and there's magic, And that was kind of what I think that original band was. It was just, it just worked, man. It's just cool.
Was Ben with you guys at that point, or were you still with like Skerrick and Mingledorff?
Well, Ben, once we sort of got Theryl, I forget just how it actually happened with Ben, but he did a couple shows with us, and it was like, and he could play like honking funk horn, as opposed to a more like jazz student at Loyola, kind of style, and we were like, whoa, it just clicked with this band, because half the guys had been to music school, half hadn't, and Ben hadn't, but he was playing a saxophone. So it was just like, wow. And Ben, had a very large breadth of knowledge, he just knew a lot about music, more than I think anyone did at that point, about jazz, and he'd been a DJ in Santa Cruz, and so it was like, that band, Jason Mingledorff was the other saxophone player who I think was so talented.
He's great, man. I
great
love
with this
him.
band, too.
I mean, look at what he did. Like, sorry to cut you off about Galactic, but Papa Gross funk sound would not be what it was without him playing sax.
Yeah, so we had Jason and Ben playing in the band at that point, and the only reason Ben got the gig was just because he just clicked, because he had less, I think, conventional education in the music. You know what I mean? Like,
he was
Ben was
willing
more
to be like, yeah, this will sound really cool, instead of that doesn't work musically. That never came up. Yeah.
Like, makes no sense.
All
but
right. Tell me about the first time you guys hit the road. Did you bring Houseman with you the first time you went? Was he part of the bill?
Well, yeah, I'm sure Robert told you this story too.
A little bit, yeah.
Where he's like, we're standing there, and Robert and I'm like, well, call him, dude, and he's like, Theryl, would you go to do a tour, and he's like, well, I need $500. I forget what the figure was he wanted a week, and Robert was like, well, we can't really pay you that, and like he hung up on it, and he was like, he hung up, dude. We were like, all right.
I didn't hear this story,
so we were like, well, we got no singer again, because we thought Theryl would tour. And then he, and Theryl would do that. Like, he would bark, and then he would come back and be like, all right, let's go, So we got a van.
Stanton's mom's van, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got this conversion van, which sadly, we were going, my friend had bought it, someone who's not in the band, this guy Ben Pekkanen, And he had bought Stanton's parents' conversion van that Stanton like went to Disney World in when he was a kid. And so we were going up into the Canal Place to see a movie. And so you know those like low hanging like bars?
Yeah.
So we hit the bar, you know, and I'm like, Ben, and he's like, don't worry, dude, we'll make it. And we ripped the edge of the roof rack off.
Oh my
like
God.
once we get like up to the top of that, you know, spiral thing.
Yeah.
And it kind of the corner of the van up, but we were like, whatever, you know, we made it. So so then we end up buying the van from him, and it leaked like a mother for the rest of, I toured in that van for years, and it would always leak like a sieve on that corner. It used to drive me crazy. You know, it was always moist and wet. We were in Detroit,
Good
winter,
you know?
God,
Yeah.
it sucked. Yeah.
That wet rain smell that leaks inside a car, that's always really good. Yeah.
But anyway, so our first tour, like we were playing Cafe Brazil very successfully, and you know making good money, and we got a gig in, I think in Vail, Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado first. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that you've heard this story too.
Yeah, I went Colorado to Vancouver.
Yeah, so we left from the Mermaid and drove 26 hours to Vail, and then we drove to Vancouver. That's right.
Any specific horror stories? Like this was the worst thing that happened to us in this first year or so?
It's been a while. No, you know, we had a really good time on that tour. Like we ended up, you know, staying at Adam Duritz's house in L.A. because we had no gigs, you know, so we kind of like came down the West Coast. And I remember Adam Duritz had been a friend of a friend, and he was on tour, and he lived in Tom Mix's house in Laurel Canyon. So Tom Mix being like the 30s cowboy.
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, Tom Mix was like some, you know, silent cowboy, but he had this house, you know, this log cabin on the side of a hill in Laurel Canyon. But it was huge. I mean, it was a big log cabin, but it was pretty much unremodeled. But Adam Duritz was living there, and he was out of town and let us stay. So the band like ends up just sort of, you know, we stayed there for a week or two, and I remember Theryl and I would like take the van and drive around LA together, you know, and he would make me stop at all these places, you know, and I just have wonderful memories of our drives around LA together in that era, of going to just restaurants and just around. But
Seeing the sights,
yeah.
With Theryl, since he was willing to kind of take the plunge and hit the road with some kids that he probably wasn't sure about, but ended up deciding, might as well give it a shot. Could you ever, more specifically, because now you're about the age he was when you were in college. It was, you know, give or take a few years.
Oh, I know.
Is there any possibility you could ever imagine if the roles were reversed? There's some college band out there that you think is, hey, these kids are pretty cool. Yeah, I'd go hit the road for 3 weeks with a questionable number of gigs and places to sleep. Like,
now Theryl, I have to say, like his motivation. So as I was saying earlier, you know, Tulane Homecoming. I played like, you know, every aspiration I had in the business, I kind of hit, you know, and I was always like, okay, you know, I just was so lucky, you know. And Theryl had been in New Orleans, and you know he'd tried so hard to be in the business.
Well, he had been in touring bands before, though, hadn't he?
He hadn't really toured, I don't think.
Okay, I thought he had
like
been
we were touring, you know.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I do think he was like, this is the shot, you know. And we, you know, when you're in a band that is sort of like on the rise like that, you know, it is exciting. Like, you know, Galactic in those days, like, it was like, you were like, we might be the biggest band in the world, bro. Like, you know, you just don't see the, you know,
endless possibilities. Sky's the limit.
So I think for Theryl, especially, it was like, let's, you know, he was, you know, once the numbers, you know, we toured we would tour America twice a year in a van, you know, and once that started to really, you know, once the show started to get big and we started to fly and we started to play the Warfield theaters and, you know, these big places, you know, I think, you know, this, to him, it was like the shot, you know. And to all of us, you know, I didn't appreciate it like he probably did at the time, I guess what I'm saying.
So no feasibility of ever tables turning? Do you think there's ever a possibility that you would, not obviously we don't want anything to happen to Galactic, but when the world normalizes and gigs start happening and bands start touring again, if you guys had a month off from Galactic gigs, could you ever possibly see, hey, there's this up-and-coming band, and they asked me to join in and sit in with them and play guitar?
Sure. If the music was really hitting me and I loved it, and
you sleep on the floor, I'm at least getting a Motel 6, right?
I don't know if I would be down for the hard leg touring, as he called it.
No, I'm talking about just rolling in the van.
Theryl would call it hard legging.
Hard legging.
Because that means in prison when you're sleeping leg to leg with a motherfucker. So it would be hard leg touring is when
you're sleeping in a van with 4 other dudes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's
5 other guys. Yeah.
That would be I don't know, man. If the music was really pumping, I'd do it.
All right. So any college kids out there, that if you have a cool band, reach out to Jeff Rains. He might be willing to hit the road with you as long as the music is pumping.
The travel is I've been around the world quite a bit. I mean, there's places I'd still love to go, but the travel is the work. The music and playing on stage with your friends is
that's the hour and a half, 2 hours of your day. That's a lot of fun. You mentioned places you still want to go. Is there any countries, cities that you guys haven't traveled to that you still are on your bucket list?
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You guys have played, like you said, you guys have been all over the world.
I mean, Korea, South Korea.
Done Korea? I figured you'd done Korea by now. You've done Japan a couple times.
I'd love to play China. I'd love to play. It's just hard to say. Touring, it's you see very specific things. You see the airport. You see a cab. You see a nightclub. You know what I mean? It's not like being on vacation.
Yeah. Unless, like you said, if you guys are doing 2-3 nights in a row in New York, you're staying put. You're not traveling. That happens so rarely, though.
Yeah, it's difficult to say, now that I'm 48 years old and I've traveled my entire life, literally. I moved, 20 times before I was in college. I've just been I've traveled a lot in my life.
Yeah.
And,
Obviously, everyone misses Houseman. But even before he had passed, you guys were collaborating with other artists. And I would think, and I'm sure everyone else would agree, that the collaborations in the past 15 or so years of having lots of people on the albums and going on the road with 6-7 different lead singers for random tours has added to the longevity as far as keeping it fresh. So you guys aren't feeling like you're just playing the same songs for the past 20 years sometimes. And it adds a new dimension in the studio, adds a new dimension to the live show. I'm not going to ask you to agree with it because I'm sure you probably agree with that. But I want to ask more specifically about the writing process for these songs. And admittedly, none of you guys are good singers. And I only say that because I want to accuse you of never actually being a singer for the band, even though I know there used to be a microphone set up in front of you. And you used to lip sync the words, and I would like you to admit that you never actually sang the words.
There were certain songs I could sing, and I never, worked on it enough, I admit. But,
you never actually sang. You were lip syncing. I know it. You weren't singing into that microphone.
There were certain things. I always want to try to contribute when I can, but I do have to sort of say that no. It's just not my forte to be able to play guitar and try to do it correctly and try to sing as well.
Even the easy ones.
I have not crossed that bridge.
Even the easy ones.
So perhaps.
Hey, no. I know you weren't singing it.
With this next band I'm in, perhaps.
I know you were faking it the whole time, and now
I could never do that because it's just off time. That song, I could never do.
You never did it, and that's why you don't even have a microphone set up.
Robert had to practice. We used to practice trying to do it, and I have to give it up to Robert that he's stuck with it and can actually kind of do it. We were on Conan O'Brien, and so we have mics, and I'm like, it, I'm not even gonna, And I heard him up once on his vocal, but I had actually up once on guitar, on just the guitar part.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the gig, we're walking away, and I remember I was like, well, Robert, you actually... And he pointed out this, minuscule guitar up immediately after I pointed out. I was like, ugh. You heard that, you know. But, so no, not my forte. Playing.
All right. Well,
singing together.
Yeah, playing and singing, but that's why you don't even have a microphone anymore, right?
Well, because Stanton has so many drums that there's no lines. So they're always trying to rip everything they can to put it on a.
I did a little research into this specifically.
Wind chime or something.
It
back
asked
there.
Ryan Jones, your production manager of 12 plus 13 years, however many years he was your production manager, and he said one gig. He said, in fact, here there were so many special guests that they just ran out of lines that they didn't have a microphone for you, and ever since then, no more microphone for Jeff.
Well, which was fun. Like I would rather, with that band especially, I would rather just focus on
making sure the one guitar player is playing all the guitar parts, right?
Perfect. Yes.
Exactly.
As close to bad as possible. Really, that is what I'm more concerned with.
All right. Well, let's get it. Sorry to poke fun at you guys for none of you being good singers or anything like that, but for writing the lyrics, you've actually written lyrics to some of your songs before, and all the other guys have collaborated in that. But I understand that you guys do often have other people help you actually write some of the lyrics for these songs.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. But I mean, none of you guys claim to be a good lyricist either. So
no, like back in the day, I used to try to, I really would try to write for Theryl, and I to some degrees of success. Like, I wrote a bunch of the early stuff lyrically, but I knew Theryl, and it was just a very familiar thing. We were on a tour bus together, and we could sit there and toss things back and forth.
You sing, or you can write in his voice, as it were.
Yeah, but in the modern sort of era, I don't really feel, the way the band has sort of evolved, I don't really feel like we hire people and then we'll like put our 2 cents in. It's like, so it's not really, something
but musically, you guys definitely
on.
collaborate musically on a lot of things. I know that, and a big step, I think, as far as helping not modernize your sound, but help grow your sound, would be having your own studio and being able to not have any sort of time crunch on, we paid for 2 weeks and we have 2 weeks to finish this and that's it, and have to squeeze it all in, or whatever the time frame might be. Now, especially since you guys aren't on the road, I know that you guys are in and out of the studio and doing random parts to random things almost every day. Someone's at the studio working on some aspect or portion of the next album, the next project, the next whatever.
I find it kind of interesting, like the career of this band our first album was done all on 2-inch tape. Right?
Yeah, all
like
analog,
old school,
yeah.
C-Scene Studios. Okay, this is the take, don't f up, you know. And then the next record was done with like a small amount of like digital editing, and we would record some things, there was computer scrolling in the room.
First album was done in 2 days, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, yeah, but we went in like,
But you guys didn't have. You only had 5 or 6 songs in the can, like at least written. You'd only had 5 or 6 songs, right?
There was some instrumental stuff. There was definitely written, inspired by the Meters kind of instrumental stuff that we were trying to do. But yeah, there wasn't that much, and there was some kind of like, Dan Prothero definitely deserves a lot of credit on that record. I think, from just being a producer with a bunch of like very green musicians, but we were in C-State and it was just so cool, it was just such a fun session.
Excited to be there.
Yeah, it was just, and I treasure those memories for sure. But so, our third record was done like half digital, half analog. The next record was like almost no 2-inch tape at all, and you know what I mean? So to me, it's kind of interesting if you look at the history of our albums, how, we sort of span the era from analog to digital. It's sort of interesting. But.
Well, diving in, when you guys did Ruckus, I think that was the first time you guys had Pro Tools, and there is
but it was the first time we were really leaning on it.
All right, yeah,
and the modern production and whatever.
Well, I was gonna say that is almost not like a schism in your sound or anything like that, but it's an obvious this is a new direction, not changing. You're still funky, you're still cool, and it's still everything else that Galactic was, and clearly.
Yeah, we had our own studio
Galactic
at that point
sound.
too for the first time. There was a lot of departures on that record.
Yeah,
I think that was sort of a turning point. I would say.
with the technology growing as much as it has, and people are seemingly setting up studios at home, people like, are winning Grammys off stuff they record in their bedroom, like Billie Eilish and whatever else.
Sure.
It's making the technology available to produce something pretty high quality with a very minimal amount of equipment. Do you think that it has helped musicians in general, or is it starting to catch up with the technology in that we're consuming too much too fast, so it has to be done really cheap and easily and quickly?
No, I kind of appreciate the fact that digital technology has like leveled the playing field,
Okay.
you know, and it makes it so, an artist can, be heard by a lot of people without having, this giant machine behind them. I think
the
it's sort of
expense
interesting.
on recording an album was so severe. I mean,
Yeah.
the amount of time and the amount of money that you used to have to go to, like you said, with 2-inch reels and everything else, like.
But I guess to me, in the end, like quality rises to the top. It's like talent will prevail.
Yeah.
Is what I think about that. I guess.
So now you guys are in the Christmas music game. I know this summer you started recording some stuff and were able to put down, at least I've heard one track of the Santa Claus is Coming to Town. Do you guys have more Christmas music to be released that we will hear soon?
No, but I've always wanted to do Christmas music.
Like a whole album or just a couple songs?
I would like to shout out Robert Walter,
Okay.
who made a solo B3 Christmas album about 20 years ago that is a go-to for me in my Christmas YouTube playlist.
Are you familiar with Gary Hoey at all?
I don't think so.
Okay, he's a guitar player from California. I think he's from California. He lives in California. He has the best Christmas album I have ever heard, and I think there's
Really?
multiple volumes. It's called Ho Ho Hoey, Gary Hoey. And it's, do you know who this is, Peter?
Yes.
Okay, so
I
there you
don't
go.
know.
The great Pete Jones has heard of him, so it's a real thing.
If I remember right, he's sort of surf rock guitar.
A little bit.
Oh, really? I would like that.
He's more along the lines of like a, this is going to sound bad, I don't mean to insult you, Mr. Gary Hoey, like a poor man's Joe Satriani. Similar type of sound. And a little bit of surf rock, a little bit in there too. But he has like, not a metal in that like Queensryche is metal. It's not metal, but it's metal,
But like classical on electric
yes,
kind of vibe.
yes,
Okay.
like but like shredding and weeping guitars. So
Okay.
that is something I can't believe that. Well, not that I can't believe. Like no one that I know has heard of him unless they've lived in California at some point in time.
Yes, no, I'm not familiar.
So yeah, check it out. But I did hear the Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and I've. Anyone who knows me or has seen this, I guess my name is in the credits as Greenberg, so people know that I'm a Jew. Christmas music is super annoying. But if Christmas music sounded like Gary Hoey or like y'all's version of Santa Claus is Coming to Town, I think I would actually enjoy it, because normally a Christmas song will come on the radio, whatever else. I change the channel immediately because it's hard for me to even sit through it. But I listen to every second of y'all's version of Santa Claus is Coming to Town. And it's cool.
Yeah.
It's just cool.
I think Jelly delivered, and
Yes,
yeah.
yes. I mean, she delivered. Yes, absolutely. Jelly deserves every bit of
I like
praise
the track,
possible, but it sounds like a cool song. You know.
I agree. Yes, Christmas music is funny. We're always like, at Thanksgiving, we're like, let's do a Christmas tune, But it
You're
turns
too late,
out,
man. You're too late.
in July is when you have to start thinking about that kind of shit, So, this year, actually, Robert was very proactive and put that together. So
Yeah.
I salute him on that.
No, I hope it should get picked up for like an Amazon commercial or something like that. Like, that song is perfect. How come I'm not? Hopefully, a music supervisor picks up on it, and it gives you guys lots and lots of American dollars for making that song. And at the very least, Ben's Dreidel Dreidel with Katie Red from a few years back.
That's my favorite.
That's the
all
only
time.
good Hanukkah song that exists.
Dude.
Like, any version of Dreidel Dreidel is the dumbest thing ever.
Did you see the video?
Yes, I've seen the video.
Dreidel, I made it out of clay. And when it's done and ready, with Dreidel I shall play. Come on! Dreidel, 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 Dreidel! Dreidel, 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 Dreidel! Beep, behind the cup. Beep, behind the cup. Dreidel, 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 Dreidel! Dreidel, 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 Dreidel! Beep, behind the cup. Beep, behind the cup.
I've
I
seen
mean,
the video.
I often tell Ben around the holidays, like, just how much I think of
Yeah,
him.
no, I haven't seen him in I don't know how many weeks it's been since I saw Ben, but
Jesus.
it's a classic, and
Jesus,
it is the
I
last
say.
night of Hanukkah, so
Jesus. That dreidel song
Jesus,
is incredible.
That dreidel song is good. Whatever.
But
Jesus is
boy,
everyone's word.
I thought that was, just...
Landmark gigs for Galactic. Is there any gig that stands out as this was a real turning point, or this at the time, like you said,
Oh,
hey,
yeah,
when we played at Tipitina's, go ahead.
Now, this was not like musically like a band, where the band's like, I'm like, the band's this is great. But a show that did like kind of put us on the map. So, we're in that category. We were hired by a Widespread Panic to open up for them at the UNO Lakefront Arena. And the year, I
They
have no
play
idea.
every year, like 3
No
days
idea.
stand. Yeah.
Yes. So we got hired to be their opener. So at the time, I was fishing with this guy who was wearing a flight suit to cross Lake Bourne in his Boston Whaler. And I was really jealous of this flight suit because I'd be cold as shit, but he had this the flight suit was like waterproof and, he was just waves or, it was winter, it was brutal. And so, the gig came up and I was like, listen, you guys, let's all get flight suits and spray paint them silver. And then we, sort of this idea evolved to put, spray paint bald,
Just make you
over
guys
our
bald?
hair. Yes.
Okay.
So we spray paint all this silver, right? So we put silver face paint on. So the band is completely bedecked. We look like Kojak silver, like alien freaks with flight suits that are spray painted silver. And everything was going great, with the costume. But Theryl's like, that, I'm not wearing this shit to you guys. You guys can off. Like, there's no way. And we're like, but Theryl, like, the whole band's going to be dressed. And so we go to the Lakefront Arena. Theryl's like just in his normal clothes. He had like a denim shirt on or something. And so we all put these outfits on and go out there in front of maybe like 10,000 kids or 12,000.
Do you remember what year this was, by the way?
It would have been 96, maybe.
Okay.
So Theryl refuses to do this. So he puts on this Richard Nixon face mask with his just street clothes on. And we go out there, and people were like, what the is this? Like completely freaks out the Widespread Panic crowd that was there. I mean, it was probably like 15,000 kids,
Is that UNO, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are packed. You can fit at least 12, 13,000 in that room or in the arena.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good amount of people, and so that show kind of like just like word spread like it was kind of like what the was that band? Like people just did not know what on earth they had seen. Like it was just like what
Yeah.
And we're playing like New Orleans kind of like meters inspired funk music at that point. It was like so anyway. But that show really did numbers went up all over the South.
Yeah.
It was a big one for us to just putting the band on the map.
Yeah. I think Robert is the one who said that the Fuji Rock, when you guys played Fuji Rock one time, you guys had already been touring a lot heavier and whatever else, but that was one of those gigs where maybe it wasn't a landmark paradigm shift for the band, but more of a, holy hell, look at this crowd. I can't believe this is happening for us right now in Japan, of all places.
Certainly.
Do you recall that at all?
Certainly true.
Yeah.
Yes, I've watched that on YouTube actually. Because
yeah?
he brought that show up to me.
Yeah?
And so I was like, oh, okay. So I went and watched it. And it's pretty funny.
It's a good gig. We mentioned that you lived on Magazine Street. As a matter of fact, you lived across Valmont from Guys Po' Boys, if
Sure.
I'm not mistaken. And Marvin, dear friend of the band for a long, long time. And there is a item on the menu that still exists today called the Bomb. That is a Stanton-inspired item, or Stanton-inspired po' boy.
Okay, let me just tell you something no one really probably knows. Except, well, maybe a few people. So when I was a freshman in college, I dated this girl. Was her
Wow,
name.
you gave her actual name. All right. Do we need to beep that out or?
No, I don't
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
I don't think she cared. So anyway, I was quite enamored with her, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And
I
so,
mean, you have a wife and a family, my God.
so anyway, ends up marrying Marvin.
Oh, okay.
So to this day, if you go in there, you may know she's Marvin's wife.
Has she been working the counter for the past couple of years?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite po' boy joint? Give them a shout out. I think I'm going to guess what it is.
I have a favorite po' boy.
And besides what that is, I want you to
But-
create your own po' boy. What is the Jeff Rains, or what would you call it?
Well, no,
He
I
has
mean,
the
I like
bomb.
the patent sauce sausage po' boy. I mean, if I have to get a po' boy,
That's your go-to.
yeah, dude.
All right.
Like,
Well,
there's
that's not creating your
And
own.
it's like I eat like one a year. Like it's like the forbidden thing.
Dude, patent
God.
hot sausage is all around. Why are you getting just one a year? You don't have to.
Because I don't think it's like particularly healthy for me to eat, as much as I would
Like,
like.
come on, man. Like we're drinking, we're having a good time. It's a big deal.
I'm just saying, if you want Jeff
Played
Rains to get off the
tennis.
po'
I didn't
boy
even
train,
ask you about playing tennis. I
give
wanted
me
to ask you
the
about playing tennis.
patents sausage.
All right. Well,
po'
you're not
boy.
going to be able to get away that easy with that.
I do love that.
That's okay. Is there a certain place that makes it just right? Has a good bread, whatever?
Well, no, not really. I mean, down the street from my house is Singleton's.
I was going to say, I thought you're in the Singletons neighborhood. That's probably
Yeah,
your local joint.
they do it right.
Okay.
For sure.
I usually get like the Korean barbecue beef or something like that. Whenever I go
Yeah, I
there.
mean, I just that's a good sandwich, and they do it correctly there.
All right. Well.
But that sandwich you're talking about is also excellent, I think.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So what is the Reigns? What would you call it instead of the bomb that Stanton has? What would you call your po' boy? And I want you to create one. I don't want you to just say patent hot
Jesus,
sausage. I
I
told you we were going to talk.
mean,
about
I would
this.
say it would have to be. So I don't know if you know the restaurant. It's called Kraft in New York City.
I do not know.
So at Kraft, this restaurant, Tom Colicchio made this dish famous, which was a short rib that's been braised in red wine for like a couple days and
Yeah.
then cooked down into this stew, and it falls off the bone. So I would take that short rib, red wine, braised, and make a sort of debris style sandwich, like from Mother's.
Yeah, just a good French bread.
If I could have a dream, that would be my.
That's fair. You can
sandwich
you can
dream.
claim that. See, let's get an applause.
That's
from
just
great
the
Pete
first thing
Jones.
that comes to mind.
Would you dress it with anything?
I don't know. Like I was just going there. Like I don't know.
Well,
maybe
I mean,
just raw cabbage. Just for crunch.
raw cabbage. Wow. I don't know. if I
Just
would
but
cabbage.
sliced.
Yeah. Obviously, you're not going to put leaves.
That would be a
of
good
cabbage
sandwich.
on the.
Just to
shred
give it
down.
some texture.
No, you're right, because you are going to want some sort of texture. I was thinking maybe there's a type of onion that might go on top of that, or even I don't know, radish. I don't know, something crunchy.
Yeah, but I do love that. Like beef bourguignon by Julia
You know
Child.
what if you did like crackling on top of it or something like that?
Yes, that would be interesting. But I don't know. I would say like
Coca van, something like that.
yeah, but done on a po' boy like that. That kind of stuff kind of intrigues me.
That's a little fancy.
So,
I like
anyway.
that. No one's gotten super fancy like that before. That's a pretty good idea.
But I do. I think my Kraft short rib po' boy would be pretty slamming.
No, that sounds like a
Anyway.
great idea for a po' boy. Absolutely. Well, like I said, super generous with the time. I've been bugging you for I don't know how many months to agree to come on this program. And I know you didn't want to do it, and I appreciate you coming on here anyways.
That's
And
my
don't
pleasure.
worry, no one leaves empty-handed. You are going to be the recipient of a certificate suitable for framing for being on the program. If you wouldn't mind going ahead and read that
I'm honored.
on the microphone.
All right. All right.
There's just two all rights. Don't get crazy.
Certificate suitable for framing for participation in the All Right broadcast. We hereby certify that Jeff Rains are officially awesome for being interviewed on this day, December 17th, 2020, for absolutely no monetary compensation whatsoever. Congratulations, and you're welcome.
You're welcome.
And thank
so
you.
much. Here is a folder so you don't lose it. When I talk to you again next week, I expect that to be framed in your home. I will call your wife and make sure that it is framed because I have her number. She's a fool for giving it to me, so now I can bug you wherever I want. Seriously, thank you so much for joining the program.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
No problem, man. Let me do the ramp down. Thank you so much to the great Pete Jones for participating in the back with the lights and the sound and the disco ball. We don't have it ready the disco ball. We try one lighting cue on air, and is it on? There it is. Tanner, I don't know if you can get that on the cameras. Please do. This is going to be what we do when we wrap it up from now on, I guess, huh? Be on your P's and Q's over there. Thank you so much to the great Pete Jones for turning on the lights on the disco ball. Thank you to Tanner Logan upstairs, controlling the cameras and doing all the listening and sitting quietly and wondering when we're going to wrap it the hell up. And thank you so much to Nick Logan for also editing and being the executive producer and whatever title it is that he thinks he wants this week. Thanks so much to Tipitinas for allowing us the space and to Nugs.net for letting us use the equipment. And I hope you enjoyed this on Tipitinas.tv. Subscribe, share, do all the things. One day we hope to make this a big, big program. And I'd like to make $1 off of it. So help us monetize this thing. And if you'd like to sponsor it, go ahead and email us at info@tipitinas.com. And I will happily drink your booze, talk about your product, whatever else. I don't know, whatever else, right?
Hey,
Would you come back on if we got a sponsor to give us free booze?
you're a beautiful man. Oh,
I'm not a beautiful man. I appreciate that, though. I do okay. I'm somewhat presentable. I shaved yesterday, so that's good. Thank you so much to the great Jeff Rains. Appreciate it. Thank you, buddy.
thank you very much. Pleasure.
That wasn't too terrible, right?
No.
I should have had notes.